My name is Daniel Myers, and I used to be a freelance urban explorer. It was October 12th, 2020. I recall the day well as it was the last time I'd felt even remotely normal. I just wrapped up a YouTube series on shuttered hospitals throughout Kentucky and caught wind from a fellow named Rob about Waverly Hills that Waverly. Rumored off limits since too many accidents involving trespassers, but Rob had a key. Claimed he could get us in after dark. I agreed. We were 5 altogether. Me, Rob, a girl named Marcy, an adrenaline junkie who posted pictures of haunted locations on Instagram, and 2 local lads, Theo and James. They didn't say much, but had enough equipment to make a full-length movie. We got in just before 1 a.m. Behind the door was a body of unknown past. Peeling paint, broken gurneys, patient charts strewn on the floor like leaves that have fallen. The smell of mold and rust hung heavy in the air. But the creepiest part? Silence. Thick, crushing silence. Even our footsteps sounded muffled. I had my camera rolling as Rob mentioned, "Let's explore the tunnel." He referred to the death chute as steep pipe used to get rid of the dead without startling the other patients. It went underground from the main building down the hill. It was designed to be sealed, but Rob was familiar with the side tunnel. It was cold, colder than October ought to have permitted. My breath hazed in front of me, and the tunnel devoured our flashlight beams as if it were alive. 50 feet and Theo's light fluctuated and went out. No problem. Batteries, of course. Until Marcy's light started pulsing like someone was breathing on a lens. She hissed, "Guys, do you hear that?" We stood still. I thought at first it was the wind, but there wasn't any wind in this tunnel. It was a low sound, a faint moan. And then it changed again, a dragging, slow, rhythmic noise, as if someone with heavy chains was being dragged toward us. Theo laughed uneasily. "Most likely rats." "Large rats," I grumbled, but my voice was parched. That's when the screaming began. Not from any of us. No, it came from deep within the tunnel, a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream that sounded like a child being ripped in two. Marcy let go of her flashlight. We ran, breathless and sweating back in the main building. We swore it was just the acoustics playing tricks on us. Rob said the building tricks your mind. It's just echoes, he told us. But his face was white. We should have left. Instead, we went to the 4th floor, the most notorious floor. It had been for tuberculosis patients in the 30s, where more than 1,000 individuals had died. In room 402, barricaded with corroded chains, allegedly had a history of 2 nurses who had committed suicide just days apart. But when we arrived at 402, the door was open wide. "I thought this was sealed," I said. Rob stared, equally surprised. It was last time. Within, the atmosphere was off, thick as if breathing wet cloth. On the wall in red chalk, or blood faded, he never left. James panned his camera in the direction of the corner, then dropped it abruptly. "There's someone there," he hissed. We stood stock still. A dark, tall form stood in the corner, turned toward the wall. No sound, no movement. "Hello," Marcy shouted. The form turned. It did not walk. It glided. Sweeter than our minds could respond, it sped across the room. In seconds, no footsteps, only sheer motion. Theo screamed. I could have sworn I felt its cold touch brush past me as it sped by and disappeared down the hallway. That is when we knew James had disappeared. We combed every floor, every stairwell, every room. No trace, no noise, just vanished. Marcy was going to call the police. Rob's phone had no signal. Mine was stuck, screen flickering like static. Theo's battery was dead. We were stuck. We fought, hysterical, until we heard something. A voice. Whispery, crackly, childlike. "Danny, come play." It was behind me. I turned and saw nothing. Then something cold brushed my hand. Small like a child's fingers. I glanced down. Nothing. But the footprints, the moist footprints of bare little feet, took me away from myself down the dusty floor. We tracked them, like fools, down to the 2nd floor, where children patients were housed. There it was darker. The corridor extended farther than it ought. The doors on either side creaked, opened deliberately by themselves. One by one. "Don't go," and Marcy whispered. But Theo was already at the third door looking in. "Just a crib," he said. Then he fell backwards screaming. Something pulled him in. We ran in to see him disappeared. "Just a crib." Rocking. Marcy began to cry. Rob said, "We have to get out now." We ran back to the first floor, attempted to use the exit shut. No chains, no lock. Just solid. Like the door wasn't a door anymore. That's when the humming began. Soft initially, then louder. Nurses. Their shadows flickered on the walls, silhouettes in tarnished uniforms, strolling the corridors, wheeling wheelchairs with no patient in them. One came to a halt before us. No face. Only bandages, dripping black slime. It whispered, "He feeds on the forgotten." I blacked out. When I came to, it was day. I was lying outside the main gates. Alone. No Rob. No Marcy. No Theo. No James. Just me. I reported it. Police searched for days. Nothing. They told me I fabricated it. Told me there was no evidence anyone had ever been present with me. But the video from my camera was erased. Except one file. It's only 3 seconds. It depicts me standing stock still, mouth agape, and behind me, a shadowy figure with bright eyes leaning over my shoulder. I haven't slept for weeks, because now I see him everywhere. In the corner of my bedroom, in mirrors, watching, waiting. I have no idea what Waverly Hills actually is. But I know this. It never lets you go alone. If you ever happen to be around Louisville, Kentucky, avoid the hill. He's still there. And now a part of him is in me. I never believed in the supernatural ghosts, but everything changed the night I spent inside Blackridge Asylum. It started with a challenge. My friends and I were adventurous. Ghost tours, haunted houses, anything to get your heart racing, we were there. Blackridge was different. It had been closed in the 1970s because of a series of inexplicable death and missing patients. Rumor had it that patients were tortured, warehoused for decades, abandoned to humanity. An hour in Blackridge, my friend Kyle said. Alone. No flashlight. Just phone camera. I laughed, pranking myself out of being scared. But standing at the gates that night, the air itself was off. Heavy. Lifeless. Even the crickets didn't feel like singing. Within the asylum stank of mold and decay. My flashlight was weakening as I made my way across shattered glass pieces and shattered tiles. The hallways curved bizarrely, as if the building itself did not want to be remembered. Graffiti covered the walls, most nonsensical. But one message repeated itself again and again: stay out of room 313. Of course I went straight to it. The third floor was colder than the others. My breathing fogged in front of me. The hall when I arrived at room 313 was strangely quiet. Even my footfalls were muffled. The door on 313 creaked, on one hinge half ajar. On the wall, on what appeared to be dried blood, was "He still waits." I opened the door. The room was incredibly intact. Rusty bed frame, overturned chair, and something scrawled on the wall with scratchy fingernail marks let me out. I was going to turn away from it when I heard it. A whisper. Emmett. My heart skipped a beat. My name. It was my name. I spun around, pounding hard. The hallway behind me was clear. My phone buzzed. Kyle had texted. 45 minutes left. Still alive? I replied with heard something. May leave early. But the message wouldn't send. The signal was gone. Then suddenly I heard the door slam shut behind me. I grasped for it, pulling on the handle, but nothing would move. Then I heard it scrubbing. Fingernails on concrete. Under the bed. I dropped to my knees, phone light shaking. There was a face. White. Wide open eyes. Mouth twisted in soundless scream. I retreated, my heart bursting in my chest. The creature, whatever it was, began to emerge. It wasn't human. Twisted limbs, stretched flesh over bone, clumps of hair taped to its head. It whispered again, "You shouldn't be here." I kicked the door. I screamed, and then it just stood there, its face inches from mine. It didn't blink. Glared, yes, its head gradually rotating as if trying to scrutinize me. My light flashed again, and darkness, black darkness. My breathing was irregular. I fought further into the corner of the room, crying out for sunlight. Then the sound started. Screaming. Not dozens. Dozens. Men. Women. Some gruff. Some squeaky. They were everywhere. I went around the corner, reverberating off the walls. I closed my eyes and covered my ears, but it did not stop. And then there again was the sound of footsteps. Shuffling. Dragging. Footsteps. As if hundreds of invisible individuals were all about me. A blast of cold air whizzed by me, and I felt fingers brush against my skin. One of them breathed in my ear. "You're next." I don't remember fainting, but I came to when I heard Kyle's voice. He'd finally come to pick me up. Room 313 was empty. He said I was standing by the corner, looking at the wall, mumbling something over and over again. I didn't remember it, but he recorded it using his phone. I was mumbling, "Let me out, let me out, let me out." I didn't go back home that night. Kyle drove me straight to the ER. The doctors informed me that I was in shock, but they couldn't explain the bruises on my arms, fingers shaped as if they'd grabbed me. I had nightmares for weeks. I'd see this face poking out from under the bed, hear this screaming, feel these hands, and then suddenly I saw something on my arm. A number, 313, broken in my skin, tender, but genuine. I hadn't. I promise. I began excavating. Underneath yellowed newsprint decades, old medical records. There had been a patient in room 313. His name was Dr. Adrian Mercer. He wasn't an original patient, he was a psychiatrist. He thought he could rehabilitate the most violent prisoners by locking them away in solitary for weeks, months. No light, no food, just voices, recordings he played from secret speakers. He dubbed it therapeutic silence. But the patients lost their minds. They began hallucinating, hearing voices. One bit off his own tongue. Another scratched out his eyes. Finally, the asylum board discovered. They attempted to arrest Mercer, but he would not depart. He barricaded himself in room 313. When police forced entry on the door 3 weeks later, nobody was there. Only a message scrawled in blood on the walls. "They've accepted me now." Never discovered was Dr. Mercer. But patients still died. Employees disappeared. Until one day the asylum simply stood vacant. I don't know what they did to me in that room, but I've never been the same. Occasionally, if I close my eyes, I can hear him talking. I can picture his face, that impossibly cruel smile. And last week, I woke up in my bed, the same words scrawled on the wall next to me. "He still waits." When I was 28, I got a job as a night security guard at Greystone Asylum in upstate New York. It had been shut down in the late 90s after several patient deaths and supposed malpractice allegations. It was abandoned, falling apart, but the new owners wanted to renovate the East Wing into a historical museum. They needed someone to keep an eye on the place at night. I was broke, single, and slightly curious about the creepy history of the place. So I took the job. The first week was uneventful. I had a small booth near the front, a flashlight, walkie-talkie, and a thick binder with emergency procedures. There was no power inside the building, only a few emergency lights, powered by a backup generator. The walls were moldy, paint peeled like shedding skin, and the air carried the heavy stench of bleach, mildew, and something metallic. On the 8th night, everything changed. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard footsteps echoing through the west corridor. No one else was supposed to be inside, only me. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the sound. The hallway was lined with rusted doors, most of them sealed shut. The noise stopped when I reached room 108. I stared at the door. It was ajar. That wasn't right. I slowly pushed it open. The flashlight beam landed on a chair, a cracked mirror, and deep gouges in the walls. Then I heard it, barely audible, at first like a whisper through grit, "He sees me." I froze. The voice came from inside the room. I swept the flashlight across the floor, then the ceiling. Nothing. I stepped inside, cautiously, heart hammering in my chest. The door slammed behind me. I lunged for the handle, it wouldn't budge. I was locked in. Then the flashlight started flickering. In those strobe-like flashes, I saw something in a mirror. A man, thin, pale, with hollow eyes and a crooked smile, stood just behind me. I spun around. No one. Then I heard the whisper again right by my ear, "He sees you too." I kicked the door until it finally gave way and bolted down the hall. I didn't care if the owners fired me, I wanted out. But I couldn't find the exit. I had walked these halls dozens of times before, but now every turn led to another hallway, another door, another flickering light. It was like the building was rearranging itself, trapping me. Eventually I collapsed in what looked like a treatment room. I caught my breath, and that's when I saw the old file cabinet toppled in the corner. On a whim, I opened the top drawer. Inside were folders labeled with names, former patients. One of them stood out, Elliot Crane. The date on the file said 1974. The notes described a patient with extreme delusions, violent tendencies, and the phrase "believes he's not insane, believes everyone else is." As I read more, I noticed something odd. The last page of the file was a photograph. In it, Elliot sat on a hospital bed, grinning. Behind him stood a doctor with my face. I dropped the file, heart racing. It had to be a prank, a coincidence, right? Just then I heard a dragging sound outside the door. Something heavy was scraping along the hallway floor. I turned off my flashlight and pressed myself into a corner. The dragging grew louder, closer. Then it stopped outside the room. I held my breath. The door creaked open, and something crawled in. It wasn't human. It had the shape of a man, but its limbs were too long, its joints bent the wrong way, and its face was covered in gauze, blood seeping through. It made wet, choking sounds like it was trying to speak through a mouthful of water. I don't know how long I sat frozen in the dark, but eventually it crawled back out, leaving a trail of red behind. I finally got out of that room and ran, truly ran, until I crashed through the front entrance. I didn't look back. I jumped in my car and drove straight home. But the nightmare didn't end there. That morning I received a call from the local police. They had found my flashlight and uniform inside room 108. The door had been locked from the inside, and there was no footage of me ever leaving the asylum. I quit that job, moved states, tried to forget. But 2 weeks ago I started hearing whispers in my apartment. "He sees you." I've seen the man in the mirror again. His smile is wider now. And at night the halls of my building feel different, like they're changing, like I never really left Greystone Asylum.